Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
Welcome back for another episode. This is Frank Agan, founder and president of AmSpirit Business Connections, and this is the Networking RX podcast, where we talk about professional relationships and business networking. Before we get started, if you happen to know an entrepreneur, business owner, or professional that seems to enjoy networking, appears well connected, and is somewhat involved with the chamber or another professional networking organization, they would be a good contact for me to meet. As you know, being networked is vital to success, and receiving referrals is the most effective means of generating business. So if you know of such a business professional, work into that conversation. It's kind of a rhetorical question, but ask them if they had a choice, would they rather be a renter or the person who owns the building? Now, they'll probably chuckle at the question and indicate somehow that they'd obviously like to own the building rather than being the person who's paying the rent to the owner. When they do, indicate that you're familiar with the franchise opportunity through AmSpirit Business Connections, where they're not just paying to be part of a network, but rather they're instrumental in building professional networking groups and profiting from them. From there, suggest they contact me using the email we provide at the end of the podcast, or the one we have in the show notes, or better yet, email them and email me on the same message, connecting the two of us. We can take it from there. I would appreciate that. At any rate, today is a guest day. I've got a guest on. I was actually on this person's podcast several weeks ago, back in 2019. I have Josh Tapp on. He's with the Lucky Titan. Now, this is how, I don't really have an introduction for Josh, but this is how I'm going to introduce him. And he's on, and he'll get a chuckle out of it. But you know that guy in prison who you watch the movies, the guy in prison can pretty much get you anything? That's Josh. Josh is a connector of entrepreneurs, and he connects entrepreneurs to opportunities. He's got mastermind groups. He does a lot with entrepreneurs and tries to help them kind of connect the dots and get the things that they need. So he's really not in prison. Never been there.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, far from it. But when I was on your podcast, it was very clear that you're I'll call it a student of networking. When I say a student, you're both a teacher and constantly learning. But anyhow, welcome to the program. Why don't you kind of give us an overview of the Lucky Titan and all that it involves?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on the show, Frank. So the Lucky Titan is kind of a brainchild that's been marinating in our heads for years. And then just this year, in 2019, we decided to really launch and take it to the next level. And I had a mentor of mine who said, hey, you really need to start teaching what you do. And that launched our podcast. And from that podcast, like you said, we've run mastermind groups. We've interviewed billionaires, 100 millionaires. We really focus on connecting entrepreneurs with the top in their niche. So what I get paid for is I help get the right people in the right room with the right people. So being that connector obviously has its benefits because I get to know both of them. And so it's been an incredible thing, and networking has been an integral part of what we do.
Now, can you give us an example of connecting a person with an opportunity, or person to person? I don't need names necessarily, but just kind of something that sticks out in your mind. That would be great.
Yeah. Well, so we actually have a free community that we built to connect podcasters with rockstar guests. And the first place for most people to start is if you're a podcaster, you interview a podcaster. And a lot of what we do with that is we help get them in the right place. So the right community is free to get them started. But I actually connect those people individually by linking them together, tagging them in each other's posts and everything to make sure that the right people are getting on the bus. But the way that honestly, probably one of the biggest ways that we've been able to connect the right people to each other is through these mastermind groups that we hold. The way we've done it is I am not a millionaire. I'm not somebody who's made it that point yet. We're well on our way, hopefully, right?
Sure. Yeah.
We were talking about this, Frank, beforehand.
Yeah.
Like, don't be throwing around fake numbers, right?
Yeah. No, it's like, we're in the trenches battling away. So,
but for us, I knew that I could get the right people in the room. And so what we did is we ended up getting a millionaire to come into this mastermind. And from him, we've been able to leverage his reputation to get 15 people into this group, all of which were paying us $300 a month.
Right.
And this is one of 5 different groups that we hold. And doing that has been one of the most incredible experiences, because like you said, that's the true networking effect. And getting these people around this guy has been really incredible, because he's helped a lot of them be able to take their audience growth to that next level.
Tell me about your journey. How did you get started in this? I mean, I go ahead.
Yeah, this is a can of worms, Frank. I don't know how far you want me to go into this.
Well, whatever you're willing to share, because
Yeah.
I think it's an important tale, because people look at me as, okay, you're uber connected, and now I've got a law degree and I've got an MBA and I worked at a big firm, and they
Right.
assume that that's part of the foundation, and it's really not. I mean, your background is vastly different than mine. I'm not turning my nose up at anything.
Right.
I don't think it matters. Right.
100%. Really. And this is the best, really the beauty of networking is that it doesn't matter who you are. You can make yourself look good by associating with the right people. And that's honestly the story of my career, because I started off while I was in college. I started a business as a freelancer marketer. So I was doing Facebook ads for small businesses, and took that business. I started to grow it to the point that when I graduated, got my degree in business finance, no job could have paid me as well as my business was paying me at that time. So we started to scale it out and grow a team and everything. But I really started to understand how a business works by running mine, right? And understanding that for me to grow our business, we had to network, because this is the most annoying thing about being a marketer. And it's kind of the concept of the cobbler's children don't have shoes, right?
Right.
Because it's super easy to get somebody else leads, but getting a marketing agency leads is extremely difficult. For that reason, there's tons of gurus out there who are teaching you how to do it. But the only way that worked for us was leveraging LinkedIn and personal connections to get business. But I was starting to get really burned out. I started to realize that wasn't my passion. It wasn't really the direction I wanted to go long-term. It was just a good little cash cow. So ended up selling out most of my shares in that one. I'm just kind of a silent partner in it now. But I had a mentor at the time who said that, I kind of announced this at the beginning a little bit, but he told me, Josh, the networking piece is what you're good at. We had built my LinkedIn profile to over 10,000 people. And we've removed quite a few of those connections recently. So we're down to 8,000, I think, maybe 9,000 connections, but we were able to scale that so quickly. And he's like, you should take that and leverage that and show people how you're able to get these business deals doing this. But at the same time, I wanted to start a podcast. So I started doing podcasting, got myself into this and around some of the top people, but quickly ended up leveraging one podcast episode into about 50 within 1 week. Because what we did is I found one guy who I had been following him for years. His name's Scott Miller. He wrote the book, Management Mess to Leadership Success. He's one of the top guys in Franklin Covey, but entrepreneur as well. Awesome guy. If you ever want to interview him, Frank, great guy for you.
Oh, I love the introduction. That'd be great. Yeah.
I will connect you with him.
Okay.
But from him, I actually interviewed him and then one other guy, and his name's Josh Steinley. So Josh is, he's one of the top LinkedIn producers, and I had randomly connected with him. So he produces content there. He's been featured in Fortune, Forbes, Inc., all these other places. And I had him come on our show. And the way we structure our show is I don't just interview them. I get to know them beforehand. And then afterwards we usually talk. And I'm like, hey, is there any way I can help you grow your audience? Help you to scale quicker. And I did that with Josh, and he's like, no, but I can help you.
Sure.
And he shot me a list of 50 entrepreneurs who made at least $1 million a year. And most of them are in the 100 millionaire category. And for our podcast in particular, that's who we're looking to interview. And so that was a huge door opener for us. Of those 50 people, we got, I think, it was 42 of them who became guests for our show. No more. I mean, the time it takes to get a guest for your episode can be pretty tough.
Yeah.
But using this method, we were able to get to the point where I no longer have to worry about getting good guests. I can kind of pick and choose the best ones, because from Josh, we've actually had many of these other top business owners have referred us a huge amount of people, to the point that I could do a podcast 2 or 3 times a day if I wanted to.
Yeah.
Choose not to, because I have other business things I want to do, but it's created an incredible network for us that way.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like what it's created for you is almost the problem of having to say no, because you probably have people coming to you who when you started out, you would be okay with having them on, but now you're
Yeah.
like, not
Yeah.
so much.
Well, and I think the
really,
hard part, and you know this too, we record episodes just like you a few months before.
yeah,
And the problem is I have some from the first few people I reached out to are coming on the show. And I'm like, they're just really not fitting our demographic of listener, and
yeah,
it's hard to sometimes say, hey, that was a great episode, but instead of posting it on my podcast, I'll just throw it on my group so that you get some exposure,
yeah,
and
yeah.
that's a hard conversation to have, but it's not that difficult to be able to create a really high value network. And that's, I think, what you really bring to the table, Frank, is helping them to create that incredible network.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're both you're doing the same thing. You're educating people in your groups as, teaching them what you have done. What are 3 lessons that you'll give people or one, what's that?
Yeah. Well, to help them to network is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the number one thing, and this is what was a game changer for us. Now that you know my background as a marketer, we tried Facebook ads, we tried Google ads, we tried
Right.
LinkedIn ads, we tried LinkedIn automation, we tried all these different things, and it was just beating our head against a wall. I mean, you'd reach out to 100 people, maybe you'd get 1 to 3 who'd meet with you. Very rarely you would be able to sell them. And the problem was, I realized, is that you're coming to people on your knees saying, give me business. I need help.
Yeah.
I'm this helpless little business who needs business. And to them, they're like, well, if you can't even get yourself business, you're not going to be able to get me business.
Yeah.
But what changed for us was the podcast. I'm a huge advocate of podcasting for this reason, because the lesson that we teach people, and we teach this in our masterminds, is if you have a platform where you can bring somebody on and poke their ego button, they are going to love you. They'll think you're the coolest person on the planet. So for example, those first 2 podcasters those first 2 guys I had on who were, big multimillionaire guys, the reason they came on my show, they didn't know how many viewers I had at that point. 0. I had nobody listening to my show, but they didn't care. They don't even ask. They said, yeah, absolutely. Let's do your show. And the reason why is because you're giving them a platform for which to brag about themselves. Mm-hmm. And it gives them the opportunity to potentially be able to get business out of you. Right. Yeah. And it doesn't matter what industry you're in. I mean, if you're a business owner, you should have a platform. And everybody says this, and this is what we talk about and what we teach, is you need to choose a platform that you're comfortable with. Most people are more comfortable. Like, most people are scared of getting on camera, right? People are more scared of that than dying in most cases. And they're like, well, I don't want to be on camera. And me personally, I don't love being on camera, but I'm like, I listen to podcasts all day. I mean, that's what I just kind of have on in the background. I'm not a big music listener anymore. I listen to podcasts. And I'm like, I could probably start one of those. And guess what? Starting a podcast is completely free. It's a great place to start. And it gives you that platform, right? So that you have video, you have audio like podcasts, and then you have the written word. So blogs or what have you. The written word is a little bit harder, but if you'll get comfortable doing video or audio podcasts or video, you'll be able to get top people to come onto your show, wherever that is. Now, this is the cool part, is nowadays you could do that by just having a Facebook group. You could do that by having a YouTube channel, a LinkedIn group, building up your own personal profile, any of those things. But it gives you the opportunity, again, to poke that status button for them. And it changes the tables. It flips it from, I'm on my knees begging you for business, to, I have this show and I think our audience would really like to have you on. And they're like, oh, absolutely, of course, because they're not just coming to talk to you. They know that when they talk to you, they're at least going to get 100 people hearing their message, right?
Yeah. Yeah. One of the first people I interviewed, a guy by the name of Fred Diamond, he's out in, shout out to Fred. He's out in the DC area, and I reached out to him to be on his podcast. And he said no. I mean, he said, listen, you just don't fit my profile. And he went on and told me the profile. And he said, but I wouldn't mind being on yours. And initially, it's like, what I was kind of a little put out by that. But you swallow your pride, and it's like, you know what? Why not? I'll talk to this guy. But he's a sales consultant out in DC, talking with all the high tech companies, and there's a lot going on in the DC area besides, government.
Politics,
But, besides politics. And he was telling me, and this is not going to be a surprise to you, but he was telling me that for years he was trying to get into these companies to talk to the VP of sales or the sales manager, and couldn't do it. And then he started this podcast, and he starts reaching out to these people, and they just, hey, I'd love to interview you on my podcast. And they could not help but take the call, could not help but return the call. And that just changed his status from being, as you put it, just another guy on his knees begging for a crumb to somebody who can pretty much, I don't want to say write his ticket. I mean, you still need to provide value, but he can get in and talk to people. And I've shared that story with a lot of people. And doing a podcast can be daunting. It's
100%.
I tell people my first 20-minute episode took me 8 hours to record just because I wasn't comfortable with doing it. It doesn't sound right. I'm my biggest critic. The other day I recorded 2. I sat down, hit record, and in an hour's time I've got 2 done. So you just get better at it. That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, to support your point, this is what people are always so scared to do, right? Like, well, I'm not comfortable doing those things, but the reality is people want to hear how uncomfortable you are. And people think that they can't be transparent. If you go back to my podcast, I started with 4 episodes, which are my origin story. They're pathetic. And I'm glad they were pathetic because I can look back and say, wow, I sucked. And now I'm like, okay, I'm doing a little bit better. Not as great as the greats yet. But the best thing about podcasting, there's a free course that John Lee Dumas, he's one of the top podcasters in the world. He put out to help you start a podcast. He gives you everything. It's called Free podcastcourse.com. That's hard to say.
Well, that's exactly what I took.
Right.
Every day he sent out a lesson, and it was like, I think there's probably 10 lessons or something like that. It was awesome.
Yeah. Well, and he gives you the technology. He gives you how to choose your topic, who's your guest, who's your ideal customer. Yeah. Pretty much doing that. And then it gets you all the way through the thing. Like, and I in our business, I was like, should I start a course for our people? And I just said, no, I'm just going to let JLD teach people because he's the top in the industry.
Right.
We just refer people to it.
Yeah. That was his thing, or that is his thing. And it's great. I'd certainly recommend that. And maybe maybe podcasting isn't for everybody, but I think that, because 5 years from now, the technology might be totally different. Who knows? Podcasting will come and go, but I think the underlying theme is you need to, in networking, you need to support other people. Mm-hmm. And if you like writing, then write short things. I'm not a big fan of long things because people don't have time, but short things promoting other people. Hey, I was, reading Lewis House podcast or listening to Lewis House, and here's what he said. I want to get this out to you. By the way, here's a link to it. All of a sudden then Lewis is like, oh, wow, who is this person? So it's just helping other people is really this, what makes it successful. When you help people, they want to help you in return. It's human nature.
Well, and I love the fact that you're mentioning that point because, I mean, every time I've ever listened to somebody talk about sales, and this used to drive me crazy, everybody's heard it. Yeah, if you want to make a sale, you just have to make them want you instead of you wanting them, right?
Right.
Everybody always says that, and you're like, yeah, that's fantastic. How do you do that, right?
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, you provide value. What value should I provide to them? What do they want? And the reality is, this is why podcasting or a YouTube channel or what have you is so valuable is everybody wants that. Yeah. I get interviewed anywhere from 10 to 20 times on a monthly basis on other podcasts. I don't care how many listeners people have because I know if one of them hits and it hits 1 million people, I just got in front of 1 million people for 20 hours of time. Right. And I'm not even a big person. And there's a lot of people who are, millionaires, billionaires who are willing to do the same because it's worth the exposure to them. It helps build their brand. It's like getting on TV nowadays.
Well, the one point that we talked before we hit record, but the one point I want to get out is, I know the answer, but I'll ask you, how did you get these guests?
Yeah. How did we reach out to them? So that's a great question. So we actually built out our LinkedIn was kind of the first way that we started finding these guests. But we have an unorthodox method because the problem that most people have is they immediately message the person and they say, would you like to come on my show? And you'll actually get a really high response rate. You'll probably get about 60% of people will respond to you. But if you really want the golden people to come on your show, record them a 30-second video testimonial about something they did and tag them in it. That will make them be like, what? Who are you?
Right.
But they'll remember your name. And then when you message them and you say, hey, this is Josh Tapp, would you want to come on my show? They're like, oh yeah, you're the guy that left. Of course I'll do that for you.
Yeah.
and it's providing true value to them. So what we do is we'll either, again, we can record them a 30-second video. I send them a video message on LinkedIn, which is another great thing to do. An audio message to people on LinkedIn, because it's unorthodox. They're like, wait, what? And they know you can't duplicate that, right? It's not like a bot by any means. But then we provide them that value because they've seen our name. They know who we are at that point. Or you send them a message saying, I was just reading this article you wrote, and these are the points I loved. This is how I applied it. Thank you so much. Doing things like that is you're really, truly getting to know the person before you have them on your show. And that opens the door that they're like, hey, they actually care enough not to just put me on their bot list and have them shoot me a message.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I had a conversation a couple months back with a professional speaker I know out in Boston, Matt Ward, and he is a big proponent of the personalization. His whole thing is about caring. And he tells a story about sending somebody a send-out card. And I have nothing against send-out cards, but it was a situation, the situation he shared was a friend of his father had died, and he sent him a card and send out cards and got a big blowback because it's like, why didn't you take the time to handwrite a card? At that point, he's kind of like, oh my God, yeah, I'm the deacon of personalization. and I didn't do it. But, so often people will send us requests on LinkedIn and there's nothing there. So I've become a fan, and it takes time, and there's a difference between, I tell people there's a difference between efficiency and effectiveness.
Right.
When I email people, like I've got a whole list of people I'll email, and every so often I'll just keep up with my network. I'll say, hey, what's going on? And my wife is like, why don't you just get a, MailChimp or something to do it? And it's like, that's really efficient, but it's not very effective.
Right.
And I would rather spend the extra time and be effective than just keep firing things out and knowing that my open rate is horrible.
Right.
And wondering why.
I like what you're going with that, because the problem that a lot of people have, so I'm a tech guy, right? I'm in marketing. I know all those different tech, geeky things, but what works, like you're saying, is that personalization. But the problem that a lot of people are having is they're not admitting the fact that if you're boosting out 100 messages a day to people, and you're only getting 1 to 3% open rate, you are eventually going to burn that list.
Yeah.
And you're killing your reputation when you do that.
Yeah.
So what we do have an automated system that we use to connect with people and to start the conversation. But then I take over and I personally message anybody who's willing to respond back to me. But what we do is we send out a message where it's like, we target the specific type of people. So we have a software we use called Youre that connects with people on LinkedIn. And for us, it's podcasters is kind of who we're connecting with right now. And it says to them, like, I would be honored to be connected with you. And the reason I can say that to everybody who is a podcaster is because I have never met a podcaster that was not passionate about what they're talking about. And I love connecting with people like that. And so that's the message I send to them. It personalizes it to their first name, so that's the bot we use. But then after that, I go look at their profile, and we get around. So LinkedIn only allows you 150 per week per profile. But it takes me about 20 minutes a day. I sit down, I look through the profiles of the people I connected with, shoot them a personal message if I want to meet with them, right? And in our case, we're using that to fill up our other private community, but it totally turns the tables, because you're not saying, oh, I'm automating the whole process, but you're automating the piece that really doesn't matter, right?
Yep.
It's you clicking connect with a bunch of podcasters.
I do something very similar. But what you're doing is you're testing the water. You're testing the people who, it's no different than walking into a bar and smiling and seeing who smiles back.
Yeah, 100%.
And those are the people you go talk with. It's the same logic, and same sort of thing. I get a sense. I mean, that's kind of how you and I connected. It's like, okay, somebody responds. There's a message there. Hey, let's talk. Are you willing to get on a phone call? And we can certainly accomplish a lot more on a phone call. There was never a sales angle to it.
No.
And that's, and you go through a lot of people, but you're not burning yourself out doing it.
Right.
And it's much more effective. So.
And people, I mean, we live in a very educated society. People can smell your crap a mile away.
Yeah.
They know when you're a bot. They know when you're just throwing a random crap message at them. Trust me, I've done it before.
Yeah.
And people will call you on the floor. They're like, well, why are you even doing this? You don't even know who I am.
Yeah.
But now when people say that, I'm like, oh, I do. I know that you posted this. So I know this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
You've got a little bit of ammo for them, right?
Yeah. Well, we're running out of time here. Let's quickly talk about your mastermind groups and how people can help you, or how can people help the Lucky Titan in general. Sounds like you have plenty of guests, but people want to get involved in these mastermind groups.
Yeah, absolutely.
How does that work?
So let me just give you kind of a rundown. We've been talking about the platforms today, getting a platform started. We have a private community called the Tribe of Titans that is built out to be specifically for anybody who owns an audience. The reality is becoming an online entrepreneur, if you want to take your business online. So even if you're a real estate agent, for example, you should be creating an audience of some sort. You have a list. Come on to our free group. So you can go to tribe.theluckytitan.com to join our free group. In that group, we actually match you up with people who are great guests for you, or you could be a guest for them. And that gives you the opportunity to start doing these collaboration deals. Then our masterminds, what we do with them is what's the next step is we actually get everybody together into a virtual room once a month. We discuss what's working and what's not working. And then we actually teach and we bring in people who are making at least 8 figures to come in and talk with us how they scaled their business. But then I will personally be in these masterminds to walk through how to monetize and scale a podcast or an audience in general, starting with day one. All of those, you can get all of that if you hop into the Tribe of Titans. Everything is accessible through there. I will personally be in there all the time. If you have any questions, you can ask me there within the Tribe of Titans. So again, the link's tribe.theluckytitan.com.
Okay, great. Is that the best way to get a hold of you as well, is through that website?
Yep, 100%. That's where I hang out almost all day. I personally respond to everybody who reaches out to me. I don't automate any of that because that's my personal networking.
Okay, and I'll put that in the show notes. So
awesome.
So people have that.
I love it.
Yep. Well, I appreciate your time today. This is awesome. We've got to do it again. I guess for our listeners, we're both Avengers fans. We're talking about maybe doing an entire episode just about Avengers. So we'll stay tuned.
Let's face it, Frank. We could talk about that for 8 hours straight.
I know.
That'll be a full day episode.
No one would listen.
Yeah,
well, I shouldn't say that. There's a lot of people who would listen.
There's actually one of the top podcasts in the world right now is about Game of Thrones, which I don't even watch, but so it can be done.
Yep. All right. Well, you have a great day.
You as well. Thanks, Frank.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AMSPIRIT.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.